Jeff Stearns, Connected Through Cars, and how could I not be excited to introduce today's guest, Derek Bell. I can't tell you how privileged I feel to have Derek on the show. Derek and I met years ago at a Bentley driving event on the Las Vegas Speedway, and then again at Le Mans. He graciously agreed to do the podcast, but in all fairness, he had just talked to someone from Porsche the day before, and he thought I was the Porsche guy. But he pushed forward anyway. A complete gentleman. Enjoy today's show. I don't know what's more dangerous, Derek, driving 250 miles an hour or telling somebody what their trade-in is worth.
Yeah, exactly. I did Jim Russell driving school, obviously myself. My parents would have killed me if they'd known. And I drove tractors and Jeeps and stuff on the farm from the age of 9. I mean, driving was second nature to me. Why should I be on a farm? And why should I then get to drive tractors and Jeeps? And why should I sort of have the fortune to end up racing for top teams in the world from those little beginnings of being a tractor driver on a farm?
And you think you're going to get removed or something?
I thought, I was going to get a bollocking for something. And then he just went on about what talent he thought I had. He said, I guarantee within a year you'll be in a factory team. And he said, I can't drive a stick shift. God, how awful. He doesn't know how to drive a stick. Which thanks to all these people that we've become better known. And I mean, it's our driving ability or your acting ability or your tennis ability or sport, whatever it is, as to how good you are. But I don't think that you should look at it like the world owes you a living. You're trying to get from one place to another within the racetrack, sort of across the paddock, and people say, please, can I have an autograph from these young kids? And you have to do it.
I kind of had enough, and I have to admit that I went and toured the city.
Yeah.
And then I came back for the last couple hours. And
yeah, that's the best way to do it.
Oh, so that doesn't upset you?
No.
Jeff Stearns, Connected Through Cars. If they're bigwigs, we'll have them on the show. And yes, we'll talk about cars and everything else. Here he is now, Jeff Stearns.
There's a VHS tape here that you may not be aware of. Let's see if you're aware of it. A buddy of mine got it in the mid-'80s. And it was called In-Car 956.
Yeah, I'm pretty much aware of it, yeah.
Okay. Motor Books International.
That's right, yeah.
And he still has a VHS player.
Yeah.
Only for that.
Amazing.
When we talk about that.
It was the biggest seller ever at that time for years. And during the time of Porsche, because we did it during that good year of 1983 or 84, and every event I go to, I would say in the world, wherever I go, I will sign at least one copy of that, even today.
Even today, people come up with their VHS tape.
Yeah, they're in DVDs now. I mean, I got
okay. So when I watched that, I mean, I couldn't know this friend of mine named Don. You can't be friends with him without watching it more than once. And you're first gear, second gear, you're talking during this whole thing. And I'm watching the tape and I'm actually like shitting myself a little bit. I'm imagining being in the passenger seat.
There were a few.
I couldn't even imagine.
Yeah, it was amazing. Well, I never sat in the passenger seat either, so I guess so. Remember, I did the voiceover live except for the Nürburgring because I couldn't remember the names of the corners. Obviously, there's 170 corners, and they're all in German, and you get lost at 169, 170. So
right.
So I did that afterwards, but the other tracks I talked during my lap.
I'm talking to Derek Bell, 5-time Le Mans 24 winner, 3-time Rolex. You're probably tired of...
I never won it when it's Rolex. That's why I haven't got a Rolex.
Oh, okay.
I won it when it was the damn Sunbank, and all you got was a postcard from the chairman of Sunbank. But anyway, don't worry. Rolex started the year after.
So we just call it the Rolex, I guess, because it sounds better than the Sunbank.
Sunbank. There isn't such a thing as Sunbank anymore, you know.
They didn't even give you like the toaster for opening a savings account or something with them?
No, that's what it was like.
Okay. So, you know, your resume speaks for itself.
Yeah.
But I didn't want this conversation, and I didn't want this to be an interview. And I didn't want this conversation to be like, and I've watched so many. I mean, the recent one you did with Porsche and I mean, I've watched so many about you, but the reason that I contacted you originally, it might be the same for you. When you're at social gatherings, when you're at a dinner, people want to hear your stories. Selling cars may not be as interesting as racing, although I don't know what's more dangerous, Derek, driving 250 miles an hour or telling somebody what their trade-in is worth.
Yeah, exactly. It's a daily basis.
I've had to duck a few times telling people an offer on their trade. But what I want, and of course, I mean, the stories are wonderful. But when I end up, and I sold cars for 27 years, and now I'm a consultant to the car business for 8 years. But at dinners or at parties or gatherings, people start asking me, of course, about cars, which I know they ask you probably, what was your favorite or what do you drive now? Who knows? And by the way, I saw your birthday, so I'm going to later, maybe I'll try to guess what your real daily driver is in your garage. I'll ask, is it Cadillac or Lincoln?
No. That probably the last car it would be, but carry on.
And you don't drive, that was just a birthday shtick. So you still don't drive with your turn signal on all the time.
No.
Okay. But we will, I know there's people dying to know like what your real daily driver is, not just the race cars. So, but at dinners or at gatherings, I get, what car do you like best? And often, Derek, for me, if it was exotic, it was often what I drove last. If somebody would ask me back when Ferraris had a manual transmission, do you like the F1 better or do you like the manual? It's pretty much whichever one I just got out of.
Yeah.
For sure. And then they ask, who did you meet? And then they ask about crazy car business stories. I mean, you're involved with a car dealership, yeah?
Absolutely.
Okay. And do you ever get involved with any of the day-to-day or any of the stories or more investment standpoint?
No, I'm purely, I'm a partner and in Bentley, Naples Bentley, and which is fantastic. And we have Porsche, Jaguar, Land Rover, Aston Martin, Rolls Royce, and did I say Maserati?
You didn't say.
And you know, it's a great interest for me. The only problem is it's 100 miles away, so I haven't been there in 8 months because of COVID. But generally, I'd go there every week. But I have nothing to do with the physical running of it. But I like going over there. I enjoy the people. I enjoy the atmosphere and the buzz of car sales and beautiful cars.
So you meet the customers.
Oh gosh, yes.
So this is the thing that made me want to call you, and I was so grateful that you took my call initially. And I'm not offended that the only reason you showed up the first time is you thought I was the Porsche guy.
Well, okay, go on.
It's okay. It's all real. But I was glad that you answered. But the thing about you, and we met in our last call, I don't know if it was our practice call on Zoom or just going over a few things. We had talked about where we met, Las Vegas Speedway. I was there for a Bentley meeting. I thought it was 99 or 00 for Arnage. You corrected me. I think it was 01.
Yeah, I didn't start with them till 01, yeah. I was during 2000, but I mean, I knew the Bentley people, and the boss, the marketing director, was a close friend of mine who's now the CEO of Bentley UK. So, but it was actually, I met him about to discuss it in September, October 2000. And
this was when you went to the brand ambassador for Bentley in racing?
No, not really. To start with, I was involved with the racing program. They had 3 projects.
Okay.
One was the finite development of the Arnage. The second thing was the development of a new Continental GT. And the third thing for the future was development of a Le Mans race car. They haven't raced in Le Mans since 1931 or 2. And there they were 74 years later or whatever it was, coming back. And they wanted me involved because of obviously my experience, having raced at Le Mans 26 times, 26 years. And also I was the leading British driver as far as victories at Le Mans for anybody, albeit with basically with Porsche. And so for me, it was just wonderful at that stage of my life to get involved with the development of those three things, to be honest, and the finite development of the old car. And that's how it started. And of course, for an Englishman to be involved with a British car manufacturer like Bentley, which I consider to be probably the greatest car manufacturer in the world historically, has been there so long, but it was very special and seemed perfect for me.
Well, Bentley boys and WO, I mean, that's rich heritage.
It was fantastic. I never met WO, unfortunately, but I met his niece. I think we had some events together. So it's very nice to be part of the family.
Oh, my God, it must be. Now, let me back up to your childhood. Your stepfather, was the nickname the Colonel?
That's right, yeah.
And he supported you in this. He supported you for, I think, a few years before you had to go out on your own in racing. I mean, I know you did the Russell racing school.
Well, I mean, I did Jim Russell driving school, obviously myself. My parents would have killed me if they'd known, basically. And then I got started racing with a friend, and I did my first year in the Lotus 7 with a very close friend called John Penfold. And we built and ran it, and the whole project was our own, done on a shoestring, as we say in England. And the end of the year, the guy that came along to help us at the latter part, when my partner had crashed the car once pretty badly, so this chap appeared out of the woodwork and said, I've been in racing, let me help you rebuild the car. And we rebuilt the car and started to enjoy time with us that year. And then he said to my stepfather, the Colonel always come into the races, or the latter part of that year he did anyway. And, said, you can't let Derek stop. And my racing partner went off to get married. And, I thank goodness, John Upton was his name, the mechanic. He went along and convinced my stepfather, that he had to keep me going in that racing program. So that's how he then helped me no end for 3 years until I went to Ferrari. And then that was it, really. But nearly all of us need somebody to help us in the beginning, because it becomes very expensive when it gets into being competitive. I mean, you can start on a shoestring, but if you want to go further, you need finance. And in those days, there was no sponsorship. Sponsorship didn't exist, basically. And he came in 1977, I think it was, something like that. But my stepfather came to, as my family said, really, my racing, thanks to his generosity and kindness, my racing gave him a reason to live in a way. Because
no kidding.
Don't get me wrong, he wasn't dying.
No, but what a nice thing to say.
Yeah. No, it was wonderful. He really loved the races. He loved the participation. We had the car, whatever it was, in the workshops at the farm. We converted a part of a barn into a workshop. And he loved it. I mean, he came in. He loved racing. I mean, he actually took me to the Italian Grand Prix in 1959. He took me to the Italian Grand Prix. We drove down to Italy. And what little did I realize that 10 years later, that I'd be sitting in a Ferrari race car on the grid where I had been watching 10 years previously, and not even knowing I'd even start racing, because I wasn't racing 10 years before I raced for Ferrari. So it was an unbelievable sort of time.
Now, I was looking at your book, My Racing Life.
Yeah.
And you talked about writing, forgive me if I'm off, but something like 100 letters trying to get sponsorships?
Well, no, it wasn't 100, but it certainly was a lot. It was a lot, yeah. I mean, it's all he did. Because sponsorship started, as I said incorrectly, in 67. And I was applying, at that time, not 77. but in '67 to see whether one could get sponsorship. And of course, it wasn't a matter of writing a letter. So I mean, the major companies were interested in somebody like Lotus or Ferrari. Would have, had their agents out talking to the big agencies and that sort of thing. I mean, it was just me writing a letter. So I didn't get anything, and I wasn't likely to be honest.
So backing up a little more, what was the catalyst? What got you to go to the original driving school? What had you sneak off and do that? Were friends doing it, or you reading about it?
Well, no, I'd driven on the farm. I lived on a farm all my life. We still live on it in England. But when was it? Hold on. I can't get the year right. Maybe 61 or 2. I was at college, university, studying agriculture, so I could do it properly. And you meet up with similar-minded people and we ended up with a group of 3 or 4 of us that loved car racing. We followed it intensively. Same thing happened, when I was at school. The whole thing was we always met up with guys that loved racing. And I followed it and I drove tractors and Jeeps and stuff on the farm from the age of 9. I mean, driving was second nature to me. And it was just one of those fortunate things. I mean, it's amazing that you can, be on. Why should I be on a farm, and why should I then get to drive tractors and Jeeps, and why should I sort of have the fortune to end up racing for top teams in the world from those little beginnings of being a tractor driver on a farm? Possibly, if I'd never driven that tractor, if I'd never driven the Jeep, that people would have. I would never have thought about it, because I would have been living in the outskirts of London with my real father and his wife then, and just lived a sort of a less dramatic or less exciting life. But it just happened to all fall into place.
But when you went to the very first time to the racing school, was it with buddies just for like an activity day, and you didn't know that it was your
No. I mean,
passion.
You have no idea that you're going to be any good. But there were 2 of us at school. There was a guy called Mick Boydell and myself. I was at school now. I was like 16. Am I getting this right? Or was it at Cirencester? I can't remember. It was at school. Anyway, it was school, and then that led on to when I went to, pretty much immediately. But remember, I lived near Goodwood anyway.
Yep.
And at that time, I was a marshal. I used to be a flag waver at Goodwood, corner workers, you call them in America. And I remember going, I went to the driving school, I think, the very first time with Mick Boydell. That was from college. And we went up to St. Ethelred together, and which was, goodness knows, 150 miles away. And you went to a sort of a little course. You walked the corners, and then eventually you sat in a race car and you went through the corners at 30 miles an hour and, one behind the other. I mean, it was ridiculous, really. I mean,
right.
It gave you you could have gone round and around a car park, to be frank. I mean, you weren't allowed to go fast. And, and that was what it was. And then I got into it. It cost £5, if I recollect, for the initial course. And then it cost £10 a corner. And there were 7 corners in those days at Snetterton in Norfolk. So I used to go up there 180 miles from my home up to the driving school. And sort of I went once a month, for a day, which cost £10 or maybe £30, but I was only earning £20 a week.
So you're consuming just about all of your monthly salary.
That's right. And one had to live as well and pay rent and run a car to get up to the track. But anyway, we all did it. I wasn't the only one. We all wanted to do it. And then one day, after about a year and a half, I'd been probably 6 times, 7 times over the period. By this time, I was lapping. Obviously, after you'd walk the corners for about a couple of weekends, you then started to go around the circuit fully, linking all the corners up at 4,000 revs, 4 and 10 laps at 4.5, and so on until you got to 7.5 or 8,000. And I got as far as 6.5 or 7. And one day, with about 8 cars going around, we were never close together. They wouldn't let us out so we could race or anything. And Jim Russ himself ran the school. He was damn good. He came over and actually started, I believe, the first racing school in America called the Jim Russell School. And I think he was out at Laguna Seca or Sears Point, one of those two, Sears Point. And Jim was a great guy. And he sort of one day just picked me out and said, who was driving that car? And I went, oh, Lord, he's going to he's going to shout at me. And so he said, and he took me to pull me out away from the other 8, although the other drivers, they were still listening. They were right beside us.
And you think you're going to get removed or something?
I thought I was going to get a bollocking for something. And then he just went on about what talent he thought I had. And he said, I guarantee within a year you'll be in a factory team. But of course, in the meantime, I had to go and find the money to get a car to go out and show that I had that ability to show people. He doesn't come because somebody writes a letter. Nowadays, of course, the driving schools invariably have a sponsor, and that sponsor sort of is looking for talent, and they sort of hide you off to a team that will look after you. Anyway, it's all karting now, but there was no karting then. So that was really how it sort of started. And Jim said, I hadn't even finished the course. And he just said, I can't do anything more for you. He said, you've got a talent. So he said, you go for it. And then Emerson Fittipaldi, he was there about 2 years after me or 3 years after me as well. And we're the only 2 that I'm aware of that really came out of there, that got anywhere. Isn't it amazing? At the time, I'd never have known it. I mean, it was beyond a dream come. I remember I drove home in my old car that I had. By this point, of course, I was running the farm. I wasn't at college now. It's 2 years later. And I drove back from Session and walked in the lounge at my parents' house. And the old man said, my stepfather, as I say, he said to me, how do you get on? And I told him. And he said, I tell you what, he said, you prove to me you've got the ability and I'll help you. So that was what it was. And, I had to go and show him that I really wanted to do it, which I think were the best words any father can tell his son. Instead of, as happens these days, people just say, here's the money, son, go and blow it. And I had to go and get the money myself, which I did for nearly 2 years with a pal that just happened to come out of the blue. But it didn't happen straight away because I didn't have the brains or I didn't even want to build a race car. All I wanted to do was get in a damn car and drive it.
Right.
And then the guy came along to sell me some farm machinery one day. And we got talking and et cetera, et cetera. He was similar age to me, John Penfold, who I mentioned earlier. And we got talking about what we should like to do. And we both had a common interest in racing. He was very good technically and wanted to race as well. And he put all the figures together, what it was going to cost. And so for £600, we actually built our little Lotus 7. And I went out on March the 13th, 1964 in a pissing rain and won the race. So it went off quite well. And then 4 years later, I'm at Ferrari. So
you're excited to be like, wow, what a thing to do for a living. Like amazing.
I wasn't doing a living out of it, was I?
But where have you been? I mean, it's taken you some places in the world.
Yeah, I mean, it was. Yes, I can see your emotion about this, but it was bloody hard work because there were a lot of kids doing the same thing as me, and some with lots more money and a lot more input and a lot more talent, probably, and also with they knew where they were going. And we hadn't got a clue. We were totally green. Nobody helped us. It was me and John, and then me and my stepfather and one mechanic. And we just sort of drifted along. But within, as I say, I was out winning races all over Europe in my third year, and I was at Ferrari in my fourth. So I guess I made a bit of an impact, although at the time I didn't think so. I thought I was okay, but I didn't think I was that good. Fortunately, because of the visibility of Formula One today, Leclerc has proved how damn good he is, and he would have got a top drive anywhere he went from Ferrari. In my day, I proved that I was pretty good. I know I didn't. I never thought I was that outstanding at all. Never did.
Really?
But I still feel I deserved a good drive. But of course, if you didn't go to the right team at the right time, I mean, there was very little publicity about Formula One. Then the only time there was any news was if somebody got killed and there was a car on fire. It's the only time it showed it. So it was it wasn't easy. It wasn't just a bed of roses, just running along, sort of making money. We'd never made a bean till I joined Ferrari. And then I didn't really make much anyway.
And there were a lot of people getting killed back then.
Oh, yeah. 30% of the drivers died, yeah.
Did you ever think about those statistics or not when you were that age?
Oh, every night, yeah.
Oh, really?
Every night. The night before the race. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, you didn't know whether you would make it back after the weekend. It sounds stupid because I'm not one of those sort of people. I'm not a daredevil. I'm not a guy that would climb a tree or leap off of the top board of the swimming pool. I'd let somebody else do it first and see if it was safe before I did it. But maybe that's why I became a good endurance driver, because I calculated more. I don't know.
Now, did you ever, I mean, speaking of doing things stupid, jumping off a tree, whatever, just as a human, like a young guy, you can drive good. You're at a light. There's some guy revving his engine. Like, did you ever act like a young guy who can drive in the street?
I'm sure I did, yeah. I never had a car that was capable of burning anybody off the line because, I didn't have any money, so I couldn't buy one, could I?
Okay.
Seriously, think about it. It was, I was lucky to have a car at all.
Well, how about now?
Well, no, I don't do it now. I just let the boys rush off, and then I would take them about 100 yards up the road in a car that doesn't really look very impressive. So, I'm not one of the I like it. I like raunchy exhausts, and I like the car to sound good. I can't stand electric cars for that reason and that sort of thing. I just love the sound of cars.
I'm sure you've driven an electric car.
Oh yeah. Well, I've done about a hypercar, but I've driven electric.
But they have no sound. I agree, no visceral experience. But the acceleration is pretty scary, isn't it?
Yeah, but how often can you do that? You just leave rubber up the road, and you've got to have a ton of money to pay. I sound very boring and knocking it on the head. It's the way we have to go for our environment. It's not because of what it does. It's the fact the end product is that we're conserving the atmosphere. And I can understand why. But from a driving point of view, it's terribly impressive, very fast. But how many times can you do a standing start into 0 to 60 in 2 seconds? You get bloody whiplash and you feel ill. So
right.
It's great to do, and it's a great marketing thing. But I noticed there's a couple of teams that pulled out of racing Formula E now to go into other classes of racing because they've all proved their point. The manufacturers are proving that they can build electric cars. They're out there in the marketplace. So, all the manufacturers doing electric cars, and they've just become, it's just the way the state of car driving is, and that's the state of the market.
Well, Derek, it might get, of course, it's got legs. It may, the autonomous driving piece, the convenience of not putting gas in your car piece. You mentioned for the environment, and I don't know one way or the other, but I think the jury's out a little bit on the emission piece because of making batteries, making electricity, the disposal of batteries. I don't know.
Yeah, you've said every word you said is totally correct. That's the thing. But somebody will overcome it. This Mr. Musk guy, whoever he is, he will somehow come up with batteries the size of an iPhone, and you'll be able to run your car for 6 weeks on it. Something will happen like that. But that's fine. That's what it's all about, making stuff more efficient. And I'm not saying it's the wrong way to go, but it's not the way I'm interested in going. But I have driven them, and I think they're very impressive and beautiful. I've driven the Porsche Taycan, and it's a beautiful car. But there's nothing I love more than shifting gear. Because I grew up with it. It's just that I grew up with it. I got a Ferrari Maranello, and I just go through that beautiful Ferrari 6-speed box, and I just love it. There's nothing like it in the world.
That is a beautiful chrome and metal gated shifter in the 550.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And so that's a grand touring type Ferrari.
Spectacularly, probably as good as there ever was. But it's just that's because I'm of that era. That was how we all grew up. And I think it would speak to nearly 90% of guys that came. You wouldn't speak to road users because most road users don't want to shift gear, as we know here. I don't know how long in America you've had automatic cars, but certainly much, much longer than we had back in Europe. I said to a friend of mine the other day, I said, I want to go and get the dinghy out of the water. I said, I'll drive. Would you drive my Jeep up there with the trailer on the back, and I'll take the thing up there because it's kind of a problem. And he said, I can't drive a stick shift. And I'm going, oh, God. I've never had anybody. And the most likable friend of ours, his son. And I went, God, how awful. He doesn't know how to drive a stick. It's like not knowing how to write because you use an iPad or a typewriter. You know what I mean? It's
I do. You may laugh at because my 18-year-old son laughs at me because I got my last car that I'm leasing is a Honda, but it is a stick. And I have a sticker on the back that says Millennial Anti-Theft Device.
Yeah. Yes.
It's the stick shift pattern.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, absolutely.
But I did get a little credibility with my son, who's an old soul, because I was driving BMWs.
Yeah.
And then, as you know, I had a new daughter a few months ago.
Yeah.
And so ended up getting another car for my wife, good baby car.
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, I better lighten up this lease payment. So when I left BMW and went to Honda, and my son thought I'd lost my soul, he actually, I re-earned his respect when he saw it was a stick. And of course, now everybody in the house wants to borrow it all the time.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
Nobody can drive. Nobody can drive these anymore.
No, I had to replace the transmission on my Jeep after a relation of ours had, and I think Sebastian, my now 22-year-old, but I think he learned to stick shift on my Jeep as well. I never gave them the chance on my other cars, but I had to replace the transmission on it because they didn't know how to use the clutch at the same time as push the gear lever through. But that's by the by. But, you won't pass your driving test like that.
Well, I taught my sons how to drive manual, my God, in their early teens in a 1970 fiberglass body dune buggy, Volkswagen.
Yeah.
Which couldn't be easier to learn on. You don't need to give it any gas if you let the clutch out just a little bit, and no problem. But they were both driving it, no problem, 13, 14 years old.
Yeah, amazing.
So, but you learned on a tractor. But I mean, you're holding up. There's probably a lot of people going to be wondering, how do you keep your hair so nice?
Oh, it's very good. It's just a matter of money. You just have to keep buying the implants, and off you go.
Okay. I thought you were going to give us like the guacamole egg yolk secret.
No.
But that's one thing about you. You always got the good hair.
Lucky. Yeah. So far.
So a thing that I want to, I don't know if you know this about yourself. I mean, you're a pretty humble guy. You're stone celebrity, or is known as certainly more important to a lot of people than rock stars, et cetera. But anyone that I mention about you that met you in the car business, and a lot of my old Bentley factory rep fellas, or the race nuts that you autograph something, everybody feels like they know you personally. So, you couldn't know as many personally as think know you personally.
No, but I talk to everybody, not anybody. I talk to everybody if I got time, or they've got time, or they want to. It's nothing to do with being a well-known racing driver or whatever it is. It's thanks to all these people that we become better known. And it's our driving ability, or your acting ability, or your tennis ability, or sport, whatever it is, as to how good you are. But don't think that you should look at it like the world owes you a living from it. I think you're just lucky to have had that opportunity to become what you became. And, try and share it with everybody else that's out there and make their life enjoyable too, because there's a heck of a lot of fans that get a buzz out of just chatting to you about racing or about the car. And people have a question in the back of their mind that they've had for years. And I've just been dying to meet you because I've always wanted to ask you this question. And it's just lovely to see this enthusiasm from people.
Well, it seems like you live in appreciation.
Yeah, but so should everybody. So should you.
Agreed.
So should your son, as I'm sure he does. And, but some people don't. Some people take it for granted or expect it on a plate. I don't know. I don't go around analyzing the world. All I know is what I did, or what I did, or should I say, me. And if you met either of my boys or my daughter, for example, that we're all the same. We just chat. We chat to anybody. Sometimes it's a pain in the ass, actually, but we do. And my wife says, "Why do you want to talk to him for so long?" Well, because he showed interest in what we've done over the years, and he's a racing fan, or he likes tennis, and I like tennis.
Right.
So I'll talk to anybody about anything. I don't go down the road looking for people to talk to, but I enjoy.
No, but you give people the time of day. You give them eye contact. You're present with them. You make them important for their moment or their hour or whatever, and that's something that no matter who I talk to about you, whoever met you, feels that way. And of course, my association with Bentley, I had a lot of people that met you.
Not incorrectly, but you said I was brand ambassador. I became brand ambassador sort of 10 years into my time with Bentley, or 8 years into it. I was with them from 2001 right through till about 3 years ago. And, you wouldn't become a brand ambassador if you put two words together and be polite to people and be humble to people and be normal. I mean, I meet, people, the royals, and I've met members of the royal family and that sort of thing. And, you have to be polite and respectful and the whole bit. So whoever I meet, I try to be, as much as I can. It's not that easy always, because there are times when you're not, ready you haven't actually got time. And I feel so bad at races when, particularly these days, because I guess I'm better known now than I ever was. Well, not quite now, but in the last few years, I'm known as well as I ever was.
Sure.
And, but you're trying to get from one place to another within the racetrack, sort of across the paddock, and people say, please, can I have an autograph from these young kids? And you have to do it. And I sometimes arrive late for appointments and stuff at the track, not to get in a race car so much, but to be there to sign books or something at a bookstore or whatever, because I've stopped because these young kids that come up with sort of, a dozen photographs for you to sign actually are a pain in the backside, because you really are trying to get from A to B. And if you stop for more than 30 seconds, people mill around.
Sure.
I mean, it doesn't happen in Boca Raton, don't worry. But when you're at the racetrack and, you sort of sign, you go, oh, they're all building up again. And you can't say, no, I'm not signing anymore and offend somebody. But there's a certain point, but I warn them. I say, I've just got to go. In a minute, I've got to go. I'll just do one for you and one for you. And that's it.
Well, you're being authentic, but you're giving them their time. Have you ever tried a disguise?
No. There's no point. I'm not that vain.
Well, no. I just meant like if you really, really had to get from here to there in 10 minutes and there was a crowd, I didn't know about a mustache, glasses, and a hat.
No, I haven't got time for that. No, I just get there. I just walk and get there, and I've always managed it somehow. So probably upset somebody on the way.
Now, you still have a place back in England, and is that the original farm, or you said you're on a farm?
That's the original farm.
Okay, and is that Chichester?
That's it. Yeah, near Goodwood. Yeah.
Near Goodwood. Okay, so I don't want to say a bad word to a Bentley guy, but when Bentley and Rolls split, that's where we would go for the Rolls.
Of course.
Meetings, and of course the factory. And
yeah.
And then I know you did a lot of the Festival of Speed also. Yeah,
I've done it every year.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm doing it this year. They got some major features. The Duke is here now. He wrote to me the other day, and I speak to him on the phone every month or so. He's a good friend of mine. He lives near Goodwood, and obviously he lives at Goodwood and I live near it.
Right.
So, we chat a lot. So I've got the Festival of Speed in the middle of, I think it's early July, and the members meeting in April and other stuff back in England. So, yeah.
That is so interesting. Now, when you went with Bentley as the brand ambassador and you were involved with the racing.
Yes.
I remember going to Le Mans. I was one of the few dealers invited, and in the hospitality tent, it was so amazing. The food and the slot car racing going on inside there. Now, to a guy like me with a short attention span, the food and the slot car racing was fun. Once I got outside, I'm sitting next to a guy that had been tailgating for 3 days, and I don't think he'd eaten a bite, but I'm pretty sure he'd been drinking nonstop the whole time. Talking to me about it, he's very excited about the whole thing. And of course, what's more exciting than the start of a Le Mans race?
My very first Le Mans was 1970 for Ferrari, and we actually sat in the car because we had to wear seatbelts, quite naturally. And we sat in the cars in echelon on the start line, and engines won't start, but I'd have it in first gear, and the flag would drop. And as it dropped, you could turn the key and obviously let out the clutch, and off you went. The year before was the last year, which would have been, that was 70. And so 69 was the last year they ran. It was the year that Jackie Ickx walked across the track, got in his car last, and won the track race on the last lap. It was amazing. Probably the most dramatic finish ever in that respect. And so that was the last year, 69, yeah. So you never saw that because you're not old enough.
But I do know that when my car that I'm interested in, of course, Bentley then, the 3 cars, would come around, it was every 4 and change minutes. What, 4.5 minutes or something? 5 minutes?
Yeah, that's right.
So that, I have to admit, after about the first hour, and thank God for the drunk tailgater next to me, or camper, entertaining me, I kind of had enough. And I have to admit that I went and toured the city.
Yeah.
And then I came back for the last couple hours. And
yeah, that's the best way to do it.
Oh, so that doesn't upset you?
No. No, I certainly don't sit and watch it.
Okay, so you can't watch too long.
I can watch, but I mean, I've done it, as I said, with all due respect, 26 times. And, you know, I know Le Mans. I mean, I love it, but it's the atmosphere. And, you know, I go and I'll go there during the qualifying one. I mean, as of now, I mean, I'm the Grand Marshal next year. I was this year, but they didn't. They actually brought a Frenchman in to do it. But I said, I'm not flying over, you know, during COVID, just to be the Grand. I mean, they understood totally. So supposedly I'm the Grand Marshal next year, which is a great honor. But, I mean, you know, I'll be there for the start. I'll watch the first couple of hours, and then, you know, you walk around and see people, and the dramas basically got a little bit less. And then you go back to the hotel to dinner, and then you might go to bed and you'll get up. Maybe you might go back to the track and watch some cars in the middle of the night. I did that with Sebastian a couple of times. And then I drag him out of bed now to go and do it. But anyway, and then you go back to the track, you know, for the last 4 hours of the race, and unless you have other reasons to go. I mean, I don't get paid to go, and not that I would have to, but I don't. What can you do? I mean, literally, you can't sit there and watch it. People do, and I think it's wonderful because it's such a, you know, it's on people's, you know, list. I just have to do that once in my life, is go to Le Mans, and in a way, you should. You should go to the US Open. You should go to Wimbledon. You should go to all the one-off special events, because you don't have to like it. You've just got to suck up that atmosphere. And Le Mans certainly has something terribly unique about it.
Well, that makes me feel a lot less guilty.
Yeah.
That's for sure. If you left, it's okay that I left.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, particularly when, you know, I mean, they might have, I mean, they get 2.5 to 300,000 people there for the races. And they're all over in their tents and they're camping. Right. They're there days before. They have that same thing at Daytona before the 500 and even our 24-hour. It's very, you know, the build up and the whole, it's the atmosphere. You go for the atmosphere, the smell, the burning rubber, and, you know, the beautiful women and things. With
Bentley, when you became brand ambassador, it took you a lot of places too. And I know when you were racing, you've been a lot of places. So it's not like you weren't well-traveled or worldly, but like Pebble Beach and I don't know how to pronounce exactly. Villa, what is it?
Villa d'Este, yeah.
D'Este. Is there any place that sticks out when you're with Bentley?
From my times there. I think one of the most exciting times, there were many, because Bentley always do things first class, and they do it brilliantly and with color and with class. No, we did some amazing events, but I think the one that I probably enjoyed, I mean, you know, I was testing in the Kalahari Desert with the new GT, and I did the latter. I wouldn't say the finite testing, but they'd bring me in to drive those models just to sort of put my little bit of input in at the end and say, yeah, it's really a love to drive, or why don't we change something? No, I think the most exciting was we went to and broke the world, or set a world ice speed record. And at that time, I'm talking about bloody 9-10 years ago, and we went to Finland.
Okay.
We went to where they'd cut out on the Sea of Bothnia, it's called. I think it's between Finland and Sweden. Or Finland and Sweden. And the sea is actually frozen over. And we went in, I think it was late January, and it was frozen over. And they actually dug a groove out of the snow for 16 kilometers, 10 miles.
Okay.
Sort of to make it like a racetrack, but dead straight. But it wasn't quite straight. I think the bloke had been on some schnapps when he built it, when he cut it. And it wasn't smooth. It wasn't like an ice rink, or, you know. I mean, this thing was rough.
Right.
And at that time, Juha Kankkunen, who was 4-time World Rally Champion, a magnificent finished rally driver, a great friend of mine now. And he was part of the team that got involved with that. And he had done it before with Bentley, and he'd done it before for years, running all the driving schools they do over there on the ice, and the sort of celebrities and the wealthy owners or owners of the fabulous cars, whether it be Porsche or Ferrari or whatever manufacturer within reason. And we went over there, and I remember Juha actually got the record after. We went back twice to do it. And we went, and it was, I mean, just astonishing. I mean, the filming of it, you can get this on YouTube, and it's called Bentley Ice Record. It's a 10-mile stretch, but it's the mile in the middle that matters. And it's what speed you carry through the mile, go to the end. You've got to slow down. It's difficult. You can't use the brakes.
You got to stop.
You basically, you're 10 miles, you have 4 miles of acceleration, 1 mile in the middle, and then 4 miles of slowdown. And you get a 200 mile an hour, it goes by very quickly.
Oh my God.
And anyway, so you have to do that. And then you have to turn around, and then within a certain time for a world record, you have to come back and do it the other way, to both directions. And it was incredible building that car up to do it. It was a car I actually driven up the hill at Goodwood at one of the events. And it had been bright green or bright yellow. It was a convertible. And because they couldn't put the frame, the roll-over frame inside the actual coupe, the 2-door regular car, because your head would have been down where your chest was, for safety reasons. So they used the convertible, so they rolled the roof back, put the roll cage inside,
right,
and then put a solid roof actually in the top in case you flipped it. But it came back, it looked like a convertible, but it was a convertible roof basically. But like put something inside and then zip it up. And seeing Juha come down there, I mean, it's just incredible to watch. And the sound of this car going across the ice. I mean, and the staggering thing is that we were driving on winter tires. We weren't even driving on studded tires. Everybody went, oh, that must have been amazing. What was it like on studs? On studded tires, it was actually slower. And it was, a few miles an hour slower because the studs actually gripped into the ice too much.
Okay.
And so we used the wet tires that you'd use in Clearwater or you'd use in Boca on a very wet day. But they were called winter tires, but they weren't special snow tires. They were just better. And then right at the end of it, they said, "Come on, Derek, you've got to drive this. You've got to experience this." So I took the car, and this idiot Norwegian journalist said, "Can I come with you?" And I went, "Really? I've never done this before. Why do you want to come with me? You got a death wish or something." So we just did one run up, and I through the mile in the middle, I did 165. And, I mean, obviously I could have, if I'd done it again, I would have gone quicker if I had, but you have no control really. I mean, I guess I was just guiding it very lightly. And of course, to start with, it's quite difficult to get used to the traction, and you can't get grip. You're on rubber tires on solid ice, 4-wheel drive, admittedly. And it was an amazing experience. It was absolutely amazing. And yet when we slowed down, I came back to the middle area in the middle where the mile was, where the speed trap was. When I cruised back I just did one run, and that was really enough. And I turned around and came back. And as I came down to sort of go through this entrance to get to where we were on the ice with the truck and bits and pieces and mechanics, literally as I came up doing 40 miles an hour, I put my foot on the brake and went straight past the entrance. It just showed you that, I mean, thank God we never tried to use the brakes. You just slowed it down with the engine.
Right.
Down the gears. Anyway, that was the most sort of quite dramatic time. It was something I'd never done. Rather like, going up and jumping out of an aeroplane with the brightening jumpers and jumping out with a parachute. The sort of things that you wouldn't do twice, probably.
But
do in the first place.
For you, as a driving experience, that was actually fun, interesting, maybe a tad nerve-wracking?
Yeah, I mean, yes. I mean, it's like, come on, if they'd told me the night before, I'd have gone, what, you must be joking. But the car felt remarkably stable, but I wasn't about to take a corner. It was quite, it was like jumping about a bit. I mean, I didn't have an in-car camera, I don't think. But with Juha, I mean, there was a stage when Juha was going, there was the road itself would become, higher, it would be concave, and it would, or convex, whichever you want, but it would curve in the middle because the weight of the snow and ice on the side would drag the road down at the edges. So they had to, when they first cut it, it was dead flat, and then as days went by, it would gradually lose some of the weight of the extra ice on the side would push down. And I remember there was a very, 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 very slight kink that, over 10 miles, you couldn't really see it, but it was there. And as you went through it, you just have to keep the car to the right just a little bit. And Juha went through, we have it on film.
Okay.
And went through there on one of his runs. And remember, he lived on it, so he's done it basically all his life, just at different speeds. But he was doing over 200 miles an hour. And literally the car kicked onto oversteer. And for 15 seconds, he had it on opposite lock like that. He held it for 15 seconds and brought it back. And in 15 seconds at 200 miles an hour, you travel a kilometer, which is 3/4 of a mile or more. I mean, unbelievable. The control was unbelievable. But that's his life,
Well, for you to be impressed, that's saying something.
End of part 1. Make sure to listen to part 2.
This has been Jeff Stearns, Connected Through Cars.